Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you may be, and welcome to the announcement of the 2021 Dan David Prize Laureates. I am Professor Itamar Rabinovich, Chairperson of the Dan David Foundation, and shortly I will invite Professor Ariel Porat, President of Tel Aviv University and Chairperson of the Dan David Prize Board, to introduce this year's laureates. The Dan David Prize annually awards 3 prizes of $1 million US each for outstanding contribution to humanity. Headquartered at Tel Aviv University, the prize was founded in 2002 by the late Dan David, an international businessman and philanthropist. It is uniquely structured to focus on all fields of human endeavor and to highlight topics and disciplines that are underappreciated or are of particular relevance today. Each year, 3 fields are selected under the rubric of the 3 time dimensions, past, present, and future. This year, the selection of the fields has been influenced by the salience of the pandemic in all walks of life. The past prizes focus on the history of the health and medicine, the present on public health, and the future on molecular medicine. The public was invited to nominate candidates who they believe to be the most deserving of the prize. Specialist review committees, comprised of leaders in their spheres, proposed a short list of finalists to the Dan David Prize Board. Following the board's deliberations, we are here today to announce the laureates of the 2021 Dan David Prize. Professor Porat, the floor is yours.
The laureates of the past time dimension in the field of history of health and medicine are, in alphabetical order, Professor Alison Bashford for her wide-ranging historical work that goes beyond national borders, demonstrating the global interconnectedness of medicine and public health in the modern world, bringing our attention to the global south, and for spearheading collaboration with anthropologists and sociologists at times of global pandemic threat, resulting in a deeper understanding of medical legal disease control policies and practices. Professor Catherine Park for revitalizing the study of medieval and Renaissance medicine, for putting gender at the center of her analysis, demonstrating how this analytic can provide radically new insights, and for producing work that has become an indispensable classic for historians working on gender and sex. Professor Keith Wailo for his trailblazing work on race, ethnicity, and public health, for redefining the social history of American medicine by positioning the issue of race at its heart, and for combining groundbreaking historical inquiry with pressing questions in contemporary medical practice, health policy, and public health, ranging from genomic to pain management. We will now hear from the chairperson of the Committee for the Past Time Dimension, Professor Mary Fissel, Professor of the History of Medicine at Johns Hopkins University, who will explain the selection.
I'm Mary Fissel, and it has been my pleasure and privilege to chair the 2021 Dan David Past Committee. Our laureates, Professors Alison Bashford, Catherine Park, and Keith Wailo, exemplify the dynamic nature of the history of medicine. Once upon a time, the field was dominated by physicians who, naturally enough, were often seeking the origins of some aspect of their daily work. Some decades ago, that changed as pioneering scholarship was done by social historians entering the field, asking new questions about new topics, such as the history of the hospital, mental health and the growth of asylums, and patient experiences. However, the central narratives of the discipline often continue to focus on the rise of modern medicine in Europe and North America. Over the past decade or two, the field has blossomed, expanding its focus geographically, chronologically, and analytically. The pool of nominations for the 2021 Dan David Prize reflected these significant developments. Our laureates' work has expanded the scope of the field and developed new analytic tools now used by scholars all across our field. So let me tell you about our laureates, Professors Bashford, Park, and Wailo. I'm going to start with Park because she works on the earliest time period of the 3. It's just how historians think. Professor Catherine Park has pioneered the study of gender, sex, and the body in pre-modern medicine, teaching first at Wellesley College and then at Harvard University. Her scholarship has helped revitalize the study of medieval and Renaissance medicine, so often stereotyped in the public imagination as useless or disgusting. In her 2006 book, The Secrets of Women, she took what looks like a really traditional topic, the history of anatomy, and showed us how thinking about gender makes for a completely new story. First, Park demonstrates that opening up dead bodies was neither taboo nor forbidden by the church in the Middle Ages, as older stories often had it. More important, the female body, not the male, was the place where late medieval and Renaissance anatomists really had to prove themselves. Making sure that families produced male heirs was so important that the secrets of the female reproductive body were highly valued. This book and a series of articles are very widely read in our field, no matter what time period you study, because their rigorous scholarship offers a model for how to use gender as an analytic and how to think about the body in historical terms. Next is Professor Alison Bashford. Having held positions at Harvard, Cambridge, and the University of Sydney, she's now the Laureate Professor of History at the University of New South Wales. Her wide-ranging scholarship has developed influential approaches that de-center the usual focus on Europe and North America, showing us how topics as varied as the histories of quarantine or of population and reproductive policies have to be understood across national boundaries and in larger contexts than has been the norm. Her 2004 book, Imperial Hygiene, continues to define scholarship on border control and quarantine, a topic sadly now all too timely. When SARS, as well as avian influenza and anthrax, became threats to biosecurity in the early 2000s, she spearheaded collaborative scholarship with historians, anthropologists, and sociologists, resulting in 3 books that deepened our understanding of medical, legal, disease control policies and practices, like isolation hospitals, quarantines, and border controls. The other work I want to mention here is a monumental 2010 book, edited with Philippa Levine, on the history of eugenics. It's easy to explore how horrible the practices of eugenics were. Hey, we can all scold. Bashford took the more difficult and intellectually engaging path, explaining why, all over the globe, such a broad array of people, progressives as well as conservatives, racists, sure, but even some anti-racists, all supported various forms of eugenic thought and practice. Here, too, her comparative transnational method produced groundbreaking scholarship. Our third laureate is Professor Keith Wailoo, the Henry Putnam University Professor of History and Public Affairs at Princeton University. He's currently also the president of the American Association of the History of Medicine. His trailblazing work on race, ethnicity, and public health has redefined the social history of American medicine by situating the category of race at its heart. His book, Dying in the City of the Blues, published in 2000, used a study of sickle cell anemia clinics in Memphis, Tennessee, to show how medical diagnosis, treatment, and the broader contours of American public health were shaped by the politics of race. It's about so much more than Memphis and so much more than sickle cell. It offers a model for thinking about race in medicine for scholars working well beyond America. I think I've already hinted at another distinctive aspect of Wailoo's work. He tackles the historical roots of problems that vex American medicine today in emergency rooms, genetic counseling clinics, and cancer treatment centers. The profound inequalities in American medicine have historical roots, and his analysis lays bare some of the ways we got here. His 2006 book, The Troubled Dream of Genetic Medicine, written with Stephen Pemberton, compared and contrasted the histories of 3 genetic diseases often linked with ethnic groups. By focusing on practices in specific communities of African Americans, Quebecois, and American Orthodox Jews, his work offers crucial perspectives for current policy and demonstrates the value of analyses of race and ethnicity for historians and policymakers alike. I could say so much more about all 3 of these. Bashford has co-authored an influential study of Tom Malthus. Park has written the definitive book on the history of monstrosity. Wailoo's book on the histories of pain and race goes to the heart of crucial issues today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fissel. Moving on. The laureate of the present time dimension in the field of public health is Dr. Anthony Fauci, for his exceptional contribution to HIV research, for being the architect of the US President's emergency plan for AIDS relief, saving millions of lives in the developing world, for his leadership in heading the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and in particular for fighting for the recognition of novel approaches such as mRNA vaccines now being given to millions worldwide, and for courageously defending science in the face of uninformed opposition during the challenging COVID crisis. We will now hear from the chairperson of the Present Time Dimension Committee, Professor Elizabeth Miller, from the Department of Infectious Disease Epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who will explain the selection.
Hello everyone. It's been a great pleasure and honour to be the chair of the review committee for the 2021 Dan David Prize, which this year is being awarded in the field of public health. This year's recipient is an individual who has not only made a unique contribution in the past, but is still today making a pioneering contribution to global public health. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the US National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases since 1984. During this time, Dr. Fauci has been a global leader in research and control of infectious diseases that present a major public health challenge, including HIV, TB, Ebola, Zika, and now COVID-19. Dr. Fauci's contribution has encompassed the basic laboratory and clinical research that has underpinned the development of effective treatments and vaccines for these diseases, but equally important, his leadership has helped ensure that this basic research has been translated into a public health impact for populations across the world. When HIV emerged in the early 1980s, Dr. Fauci led the research efforts at NIAID to develop diagnostic methods and effective treatments for AIDS, and was the principal architect of the extraordinary global initiative known as the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR. This was developed under George W. Bush's presidency and was designed to bring AIDS relief to resource-poor countries by way of providing antiretroviral drugs and other interventions, HIV testing and counselling. Over the 17 years that it has been in operation, PEPFAR has provided life-saving HIV drugs to over 16 million infected individuals and has enabled over 2.5 million babies born to women living with HIV to escape infection with the virus. The program has also provided critical care and support for over 6 million orphans, vulnerable children and their caregivers so they can survive and thrive. More recently, Dr. Fauci launched NIAID's strategic plan for TB research in support of the World Health Organization's End TB initiative. Despite the availability for some years of vaccines and antibiotics for prevention and treatment of TB, it still causes over 1.5 million global deaths a year. There is an urgent need for more effective vaccines and treatments to overcome the problem of multi-drug resistant TB, and under Dr. Fauci's leadership, a strategic plan has been put in place to reinvigorate research efforts to prevent, diagnose and treat TB for the benefit of the global community. In 2020, with the emergence of COVID-19, Dr. Fauci led NIAID's research efforts to evaluate different vaccine approaches for the virus, building on the earlier vaccine technologies developed under his leadership for MERS and the first SARS virus that emerged nearly 20 years ago. Of particular importance was the mRNA platform that has proved so successful, with vaccines using this technology now being given to millions worldwide. His courageous leadership in this very challenging COVID crisis has been noted worldwide, always vigorously defending the science in the face of uninformed criticism. Throughout his career, Dr. Fauci has used his talents to advise presidents and other world leaders, politicians, scientists, and lay people about scientific advances and the capacity of science to improve the health of us all. Taken together, Dr. Fauci's accomplishments and contribution are a testament to the value of a career devoted to improving global health and make him a most worthy recipient of the Dan David Prize. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Miller. And finally, the laureates of the future time dimension in the field of molecular medicine are, in alphabetical order, Professor Zelig Shahar for the breakthrough that revolutionized T-cell therapy by engineering chimeric antigen receptors to replace the native receptors of T-cells, enabling the T-cells to specifically target proteins of tumor cells, and for laying the groundwork, together with Dr. Steven Rosenberg, for the clinical application of this technology to combat cancer. Dr. Carol June, for innovations to the engineering of CAR T cells and their successful deployment for patients with advanced leukemia and B-cell lymphoma, for ongoing efforts to apply CAR T cell immunotherapy on behalf of children with cancer, and for engineering the next generations of CAR T cells for even more widespread use. Dr. Steven Rosenberg, for demonstrating that immune stimulation of T cells in vivo mediated complete durable regression of cancer in humans, for his landmark discoveries leading to the first cancer immunotherapies, for his ongoing efforts to develop immunotherapy for solid tumors, and for the combination of insight, care, and fearlessness that enabled his translation of basic science to medical practice. We will now hear from the chairperson of the Committee for the Future Time Dimension, Professor Mary Claire King, American Cancer Society professor at the University of Washington, Seattle, will explain the selection.
Zelig Eshar, Steven Rosenberg, and Carl June are honored for their pioneering work in harnessing immunology for cancer therapy. Their work spans more than 40 years. Its consequence is that many patients with metastatic melanoma, sarcomas, lymphomas, and leukemias are now in long-term remission. Their work is based on T cells, specifically CAR T cells. T cells are one form of white blood cell. T cells are critical to the body's response to foreign proteins, whether from viruses or cancers. T cells have receptors, proteins that recognize these foreign proteins, triggering the body's immune response. CAR T cells are T cells that have been engineered to produce artificial receptors to target specific foreign proteins, for example, on tumor cells. The CAR in CAR T cells stands for chimeric antigen receptor because the engineered receptor is a chimera with multiple functions in a single protein. That engineered protein is attached to a normal T cell and then sent to attack and destroy tumor cells. Our laureates created CAR T cells and translated them into successful treatments for patients. In the 1980s, Steve Rosenberg, then a young surgeon scientist at the National Cancer Institute, discovered that among patients with metastatic cancer, treatment with their own highly stimulated T cells led to partial regression. But the treatment was not sustainable because of the side effects of stimulation of the patient's T cells. At the same time, Zelig Eshar, then a young immunologist at the Weizmann, created the first CAR T cells. Then Zelig went to visit Steven. During his sabbatical in Steven's lab in the early 1990s, Selig set the stage for using CAR T cells in patients. He showed that by designing CAR T cells to target specific antibodies, he could defeat melanoma. In 1998, this work led to the first FDA-approved immunotherapy for melanoma. Steve Rosenberg and his team followed up this work. They showed that transfer of T cells, either naturally occurring T cells from the patient or Selig's engineered CAR T cells, could treat metastatic cancer. They showed that this treatment succeeded in their patients because it targeted tumor proteins that differed from normal proteins as the result of somatic mutations in cancers. In the early 2000s, Steve and his team used CAR T cells to successfully and safely treat patients with B-cell malignancies. In 2017, CAR T technology was the basis of a drug approved by the FDA to treat advanced B-cell lymphoma. These discoveries also fueled the development of treatment for advanced mantle cell lymphoma. Carl June initially focused his T-cell research on treatment of HIV and AIDS. About 20 years ago, as an oncologist at the University of Pennsylvania, he turned his focus to cancer. Carl developed new technologies for engineering T cells into CAR T cells. This technology was used for the first time in 2010 to treat adult patients with leukemia. The next year, complete remission was obtained for patients with advanced chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and a few years later for patients with 2 forms of lymphoma. This technology has been approved by the FDA for treatment of B-cell lymphoma and ALL. Now Carl is using CRISPR gene editing to engineer T cells for patients with other metastatic cancers. Selig Ashar, Stephen Rosenberg, and Carl June pioneered the development of immunotherapies for patients with advanced cancer. Their work is a perfect union of basic science and clinical medicine. They are heroes of molecular medicine. We are honored to honor them. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor King. Professor King was a laureate of the Dan David Prize in 2018 in the field of personalized medicine.
Thank you, Professor Porat. The laureates will be honored in an online ceremony which will be broadcast live on May 9, 2021, and we invite you to join us. This will be the second year in a row we are not able to meet at Tel Aviv University for the festive event that has been the hallmark of the Dan David Prize for nearly 20 years. Hopefully in 2022, we will be able to resume that tradition. We have reached the end of today's announcement. Thank you for being with us.